Hi everyone, this is Kyle with K-Debate. I just finished making my last video, uploaded it, watched it, make sure it was all okay. And I wanted to point out a few things, not about my previous video, but about arguments in general. The cool thing about arguments, about debates, about discussions and conversation is that information is being exchanged. Information is the key word there. If you are not giving information, you are not having what's the word? Not progressive, but a positive effect on the other person and even on yourself. You aren't promoting the sharing of knowledge. You are trying to tear something apart or just feel good. There is a very important aspect of conversation that is lost on a vast majority of people, and that is listening, that is knowing what you're talking about, that is considering what the other person says, and a lot of people consider that part of listening, but I consider it a step above. And the last one, or, there's lots of different points to this, but there's just, if you don't listen, you're not going to understand what they're saying. If you don't care, you're not going to internalize and analyze. And if you don't know what you're talking about, then you don't add to the conversation. So there's just, people don't know how to make a good argument. And I've said this many times before. There are people that just aren't articulate. They don't know how to give a good argument, and that's fine. That's not their fault necessarily. But there are people that just don't care about discussion. Yesterday I went to a chat room because it was late and I was tired, but I didn't want to go to sleep yet, and I couldn't find anything to do. So I just struck up a conversation with somebody in a chat room. I found them to be extremely abrasive. There was a lot of people in the chat room, and they started making really, really bad remarks. I mean, offensive to everybody. They were talking about the Holocaust, rape, homosexuals. They were insulting people that were new to the chat room, including me, and I didn't quite understand why they were doing that. And I found out they were trying to be incendiary. They were trying to start an argument so that they can kick people out because it was funny. They never did kick me out of the room. They kicked out everybody else. And they banned them all. And I was like, why are they doing this? It's hurting the popularity of the room. It turns out the room was only for them and their friends to do that to people. So that's kind of messed up. But I struck up a conversation with, they weren't one of the moderators for the room. I thought they were. I think they had the power to ban, but they weren't actually one of they weren't allowed to do it without permission. So it was kind of a weird setup. But I was talking to them for almost 2 hours about what morality was, what ample consideration was, and how just because you disagree with somebody doesn't mean you have the right to abuse. And they made a lot of semi-reasonable arguments, but to me, I did not agree, and I told them as much. I kept saying to them, we come from a different foundation. Our lives have a different foundation in what our value system is. I value. Here's one of the quotes I didn't write down any of their quotes, but paraphrasing, I should say, not a quote. You should not care about everybody, and you should not go out of your way to help everyone. It is detrimental to yourself. Therefore, it is not worth doing. And I considered that a reasonable stance, but not my stance. I accept the sacrifices required and actually think that, yes, it is my responsibility to do good, because that is my value system. I gain value internally by helping people externally. And in some ways that is selfish of me. In some ways that is, I do good to feel good. And I know that. I accept that. but I think that it is still better than not doing good at all. And in his actions, actually harming people. Now, he justified it as, it's the internet, suck it up. And I felt that was apathetic. It was, just because I'm harming you or trying to harm you doesn't mean you should care, because I don't care. And when I pointed that out, they got upset. And I was trying to tell them that apathy in regards to a value system makes it compound. They said it doesn't matter because they shouldn't care, because what I am doing is not important. And I said, well, it is important to some people. So, well, their argument had two aspects. I shouldn't care, and they shouldn't care. Now, I admit, he does not have to care. But that does not mean that they have an obligation not to care also. So, belittling their value system is apathy. Empathy is caring. So, the lack thereof would be apathy. That was my argument. And he didn't follow. He felt that no matter... He tried to justify it in saying he's been through some hard stuff and got over it. But then he brought up the Holocaust and how it was funny. This isn't my old roommate. This isn't my old roommate talking. It was somebody on the internet. He thought it was funny. He said, well, it was so long ago that it doesn't matter. And I was like, well, there are people that were in the Holocaust that are still alive. And he said, well, I can count it on one hand. And I said, well, first of all, you don't know that. And second of all, just because most of them are dead doesn't mean... Oh, and his argument was, well, they were the survivors. What do they have to complain about? And I said, you don't understand what pain is, do you? So he kind of jumped off of that and went off onto rape. He said that rape is not condoned. It is not promoted by him. He does not promote it. But he made the point of, and this is not, I'm not saying it's a valid point, but this is his argument. Most rape victims are people that put themselves into the situation to be raped, so that it is not fully the fault of the rapist every time. And I pointed out that yes, that is a reasonable argument for people that put themselves into danger, but that doesn't take away from the immorality of the act forced onto them. Moral luck. I mean, you can get plastered and pass out in a hallway somewhere and not get raped. But if you do get raped, it's not your fault. It is irresponsible of you, but it is also an act of somebody else that is actually the one doing it. You're not setting yourself up to be raped. You're putting yourself in a situation where you can be. So that is irresponsible, but it is not your fault directly. And I felt that it was extremely inflammatory of him to say that to a bunch of people. And they were generally young people. So not young as in like 5, but young as in like teenagers. 17, 18. And to just disregard any, not trauma, but emotional sensitivity they might have. It's not, it is apathetic. It is not empathetic. So I was making these arguments and he was making his arguments, and this video is about how to make why are arguments important, how to do them, and all that stuff. And this is how you have a discussion. I disagreed, he disagreed, he did insult me a lot. So did a lot of the people in the room, because they were all close friends and they were being really, really gross. But all of that aside, I was able to not be inflammatory, not be insulting, and to give my information as well as I could. And that's why I wasn't banned from the room. Other people were like, they kept using the term nugget. They would say a derogatory word and then nugget. You are a blank nugget. you are a this nugget, a that nugget, a nugget muncher, just all these random things that I started thinking was funny because I was trying. I kept because there was a whole bunch of conversations going on between other people, and that kept coming up. So I kept asking them whenever they did it, what is a nugget? How is it a nugget? Why do you keep using nugget? And it was bothering the heck out of everybody because I was having this really, really big conversation where we were both making big posts, and then randomly, all over the place, I was having these little ones with everybody. Because I love doing that. I like having multiple conversations because I know they're reading my posts. They just don't care. So when they say something, and I respond to it really quick, it confuses them because they don't expect me to be able to focus on a whole bunch of things. This time it's just water. Like that. I just throw something out that just was like, what? It grabs people's attention. And I like that because they may not be listening to me. They may not care. But when I start talking to them and them and them and them, people are like, wait, how is he doing this? And they'll try to figure out what I'm doing. And sometimes they don't know that I'm not talking to them, so they'll start reading my other comments. And then it's not trying to put myself in the spotlight. It's trying to be heard because it was they were involved in the discussion. They were just mostly insulting. They were like, pat this guy on the back and screw you. And I didn't like that, but I was also pulling them in to try and get them to say something. Not so that I can attack them, but so that they can be part of the conversation aside from the insults. And that's not easy to do sometimes because they don't want to be part of the conversation because they don't care. And I was commenting that that's apathy. And it was really funny. I was kind of insulted throughout most of it, but I was able to get past that and not lose my cool. At one point, I did say something really mean to one of them. What was it? They said I was not using proper reasoning. They flat out said I was being illogical and unreasonable in what I was saying. And I responded back. Something to do with just because you disagree with what I'm saying does not mean I'm not using reasoning. I am using a different value system than you. That's not me. They responded with something insulting. I responded with, and you just did it. And it was something small, but it was like if you caught it, you'd realize that was me insulting them by admission to completely disregarding what I just said, saying they don't do that, and then doing it. That's what it was. I'm not insulting you, and I'm not changing my stance. I am pointing out when you're wrong. That's what I said. And it's like right there. I quoted him a few times. I would grab what they said and repost it. It's like, you just said this. It's like, that's not what I meant. It's like, that's what you just said. There is no reasonable reason why I would not take that as the context of what you said. It's like, well, I wanted to say this. Like, you should have said. So I was able to do that, and if other people would have been viewing that didn't already agree with him and that were neutral on the subject, would have probably seen him as a sociopath. Not because of what he promoted, but because of how he explained what he promoted. He just didn't care. And I at one point, he kept posting an emoticon which was comprised of not semicolons, forward slashes, backslashes, a colon, and something else, and it looked like a guy going like this. Like this. Hands up like this, like he just doesn't care. And it's hard to get into the shot. And he just kept posting that. And he's like, when I asked him what his philosophy was, he says this. It's like, that looks like a guy that doesn't care. And he's like, yes, that's what it is. It's like, is that like YOLO? And he's like, no, it is not like YOLO. It just means I don't care about what I do. And I was like, that's kind of like what YOLO is. YOLO is, you only live once, therefore go nuts. Pretty much. That's an interpretation. And he got so offended. He's like, no, YOLO is wrong. I'm not like that. He's like, but I also don't care. And he posted it again. So I knew he was just trying to get a response. And he did, but I never once insulted outright. I didn't call him a nugget. which I still don't know what it means. It doesn't make sense. It's a nugget's like a piece of something. It's not a shape. It's not. It's like it's a certain amount. Oh, my battery's gonna die. I need to plug this in. Okay, so I'm gonna end this video because my battery's dying. I don't want to get up. Okay, so reasonable arguments. There is a reasonable argument for everything, but the value of the argument's contents can be vastly different based off of a person's foundation. That is where people disagree. You can have everything else the same except the value of the argument, but that is what changes it. A valid argument is not subjective to the value of its component parts. Anyone can make a reasonable argument and disagree on the outcome or conclusion because you have a different value system, but it's still a valid argument. Disagreeing doesn't make something invalid. That's what I'm saying. So, battery's dying, gotta go, plugging it in and making another video. You guys take care, respond please, and YOLO! I'm kidding, I don't like YOLO. Bye.